that's normally made June-ish. That's the you've decided you're going for it and you're going to make an announcement.
Others do all that sort of thing.
That's yeah. But before that, you need to really think about if that's what you want. This is good for me. This is good for my family. Have all those thoughtful, conversations with your hostess really and your support system.
So I have said something what those are. So I understand that's what.
Yeah.
Right, we have...
Sorry.
Oh, yeah, fire starts to a runner. Cuff gets going.
Anyway, I thought you were
Make some
staying.
real decisions.
Wow, she's just amazing. I thought you
Your
were just
true
doing
colours.
extra just because.
Jeez.
Oh,
Nice. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, anyway.
Merry Christmas. Take care.
Merry Christmas and away.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Thank
Merry
you.
Christmas, Mike.
Have a good rest
Yeah, you too.
You too.
and stay
Welcome,
COVID
Stephanie.
I'm free. God,
I haven't heard that.
good luck
Save
to all of
COVID.
us.
Here on my own,
Yeah, really.
on this side.
Right, we're just... Will's
Jess will come and sit next to you.
Will's just disappeared. We'll wait for Will. Hoovering up vast amounts of people or something. Okay. We've got a quorum, so we'll start without Will, but we won't do too much without him there. Okay, so we'll welcome everybody. The FARS meeting of December 15 is now open. And please feel free to finish your cups of tea, lunch, whatever. No problem at all. Short agenda, a very important item on it though, the annual report in particular. So we'll just see how we go. I may need to excuse myself just on 2:30. There's another Zoom call I just cannot get out of. Or we may finish by then. If I need to, I'll just pass the chair to a colleague here, Neil. Okay, so we've got agenda, we've got the it's conflict of interest, so please declare any changes and any conflicts anyone may have around any items we have today. We have the minutes from the previous meeting held on the 13th of October. No doubt you've all gone through those. Any points arising from any of the way that's captured from anyone there? You were there, Will. Stephanie, you've got a point here?
Just one point on the minutes. I think we talked about at the time the people and capability issue and audit, and if I can be of any assistance. I'm working through some of those issues. I haven't heard from anyone on that yet, so just not letting that one slip, so that it's still on the radar. I'm happy to still catch up with people in the new year.
Thank you, Stephanie. We'll follow up on that. It's been a slightly horrendous time for our PNC team. But we'll get that sorted for the new year.
Thanks, James. I think particularly pursuant to item 8, where we're talking about our annual audits, that we have a bit of discretion over here. I think Helen was leading that discussion, people and capability, and there was a bit of parallel work to be happening, and so thanks if you could just follow that up and touch base, just do it directly with Stephanie, please. Other than that, no need to change it, we've just noted that, and there's kind of an action happening there. Would someone like to move that those minutes be accepted? Stephanie, thank you. Thanks for seconding, Will. They're passed. Very much. Excuse me, I don't have a written agenda, so I keep going on. So our next item is the annual report and summary. So I'm just going to click into the annual report. Well, we have the paper there. Who's going to talk to that? Is it Jess or is that yourself? Who's leading into that? And then I'll just see if anyone's got
Process it all?
questions of it. Linked up with that is the Audit New Zealand. I think that's in your paper, isn't it? They've got sore knees or something, unable to deliver. Anyway, I'll give give you the
I'm happy
floor,
to,
Jess.
I'm not sure if Sarah wants to make any comment around the process. Sarah's project managed, I guess, pulling together the annual report, which is a huge job and comprises the non-financial elements, and I suppose the financial statements is a big aspect of the annual report. And I'm happy to, and we've got Ross here to answer any specific questions on the financial statements themselves. I guess it's worth noting that we are a little later than we would have anticipated or would have liked reporting the annual report through to the committee. We had proposed to have this meeting last week and we pushed it out 1 week to give Audit a little bit more time. But we are anticipating that we will get a late audit opinion from Audit New Zealand, and primarily is just due to lack of resource from their side of things, yeah.
What does it, and this is Groundhog Day as per last year, can you just confirm to us, what does it mean that we don't have Audit NZ signing off on our report in time? Do we get smacked around by anybody, or is it just a note? Could you just confirm that, please?
We just need to include a note in our annual report that we were late with the adoption.
Do we say why?
We can include, some narrative around why.
I think we should.
Chair, I would expect that in the annual report of the Office of the Auditor General that will get noted to Parliament for our lateness probably.
That's right, so I'm preempting that. So for the record.
Other than that, no sanction.
Yeah.
It's probably also worth noting that a number of entities probably haven't actually started their audits yet for the year ending 30 June, so a number of audits are starting after Christmas, so they are especially late. Yeah.
Wow. I know HBRC have completed theirs, as it noted in your paper. Okay. All right.
So, so we have, we're expecting an unmodified audit opinion, but I would note that the ACC adjustment has just gone to the technical team, and so we are still receiving a number of audit inquiries from the technical team around the financial statements.
And what's the worst thing that could happen in and around that ACC issue? So we've redone the accounts last year, took an adjustment, put one in this year. What's the worst thing they can say?
And you may ask us to reconsider our treatment, the accounting treatment of the adjustment. That would be the worst case scenario.
That's what it'll be. It's, the technical team are into the accounting standards and, crossing your T's, dotting your I's type of thing. Hopefully they don't get too picky, because sometimes they get picky and, we look at it and trying to say, well, does it make sense? And they often just look at the individual standards and how they should be applied. And all it'll be is cosmetics in terms of how it's presented.
That's right, because you've front-loaded the worst-case scenario by taking these adjustments on.
Yep.
So financially, it's just...
Yeah. And, they just asked, we've just recently answered questions, and some of the questions along about the nature of the lease agreements and, for example, do we have to sell to somebody who wants to sell, and we say, no, we don't have to sell, but we've got a policy, we've always actively encouraged and sold to them.
Bless them.
Yeah.
Okay. Where would there be?
It's one of these things that you never know what may or may not come out of a technical review with Audit.
All right.
We'll just deal with it when it happens.
Okay. Well, if you just keep us brief, please, if there are anything materially different other than the narrative that they're going to give us, even though it's late.
Yep.
Well then, if you like, unless you want to make some other comments, we could go to the report itself. You'll lead us into it. I've got a few areas of interest, and I know some other colleagues do. Would you like to do that? Should we do it that way? Okay, all right. So I'm looking at the non-summary, the actual report itself. I didn't see in there, but tell me if I've missed it. We talked about this last time. There's lovely pictorials of the councillors in there, which is nice. The attendance to meetings used to be in these reports, I think. It seemed to disappear last year. If it was a company board report, it would be how many meetings were attended by directors or something.
So I understand, Leanne, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there was a council decision at some point the last few years to not report those. So that was a decision of council. So if there's a different view, we need direction from council again. That's something we want to see reported. So if that's a recommendation from this committee, that might be something we can take up.
It's
Right,
not,
is that right?
it's not a standard thing you'll see in other councils' reports, but it's entirely optional for council.
Well, the audience is ratepayers who pay the bills at the end of the day, so it's not a biggie. I just do recall having the discussion last year. And it's kind of a weird year to do this with Zooms and COVID and stuff. So can we just flag it for an item of interest for next year, perhaps? I think I don't want to get in the way of it. Then, if I can ask a point, then I'll pass to Will and Stephanie and then Neil, if you like. The more specific questions. So on the whole, thanks very much. The report looks pretty good. Tell the world how well we're doing. Of course, our eyes naturally go to the not achieved part, as our parents would when we took our reports home. And just like to talk to a couple of those a bit more. I'm particularly interested in the issues in and around water, fresh water. There's a whole section on there on the various projects, Maraitotra, Waipuka, etc., etc. All absolutely fine. The bit I can't see is when we get down, much further down, is at page 38. Yes, part 3, community outcomes. Basically, we're talking about the quality of water. And we have a target 2050, which is lovely, but we're off track on a 2050 target. This is on page 36 of the larger report. So I just struggle to see how we can be off track on something 29 years away. And that being aside, there's some wording in there such as, we do not have evidence of widespread improvement occurring during this time. However, the State of Environment report due at the end of next year will provide a clear indication of our capacity, blah, blah, blah. Now, you may recall that's been of strong interest of mine. Is there anything we can add to that? We just have a nice commentary above it, but it is a 2050 target. Further on, you talk about the swimmable areas, etc. For example, where our pollution monitoring, our water quality monitoring, the number of sites we have or don't have this year versus last year. Can that be in there somewhere, or if not, why is it not?
So, Chair, I think the primary determinant of our confidence as to whether or not we're heading in the right direction to achieve the target is the implementation of limit setting under the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management. At the moment, we've got that only operative in the Tukituki catchment. We've obviously got for the Hiritonga catchments currently with commissioners for decisions the tank plan change limit setting. But for the rest of the region, that's all work yet to be done as part of Kotahi. So I think until A, limits have been set, and B, we have active implementation of those plans on the ground, we're not at a point now we could say confidently we're heading towards achieving this target. And certainly the anecdotal science monitoring is that we don't have an improving trend over many, let alone all of our degraded rivers. So we there's a lot of work to do here, and the narrative was aimed at achieving that. If there's more embellishment, particularly around the work we have to do in the plan change space and implementation of the NPSFM, then we could embellish it a bit more.
Well, not about embellishing it, it's just what's real.
Yeah.
And look, this is our report, so we'll Skype done well of and be honest about what hasn't gone as well, and that's fine. It's just the emphasis on something like that, because to me, those particular type of measures give us social licence or not to do many things, such as Karamu and Ahuriri water quality, which you particularly mentioned prior. So, look, I'm comfortable with your answer, and a 2050 target can be whatever you want tomorrow. So be it. But having said that, when we go to our carbon neutrality, so thanks, there's a lot of action in there, page 43. That's also a 2050 target. And there's a lot of commentary there, and we've taken some actions this year. That's fine. So, with respect to what you just said, it's a lot further down the track, what seems to be. So where do we need to be in 2025 to reach our carbon neutrality target of 2050?
So I think we could, we could argue that the freshwater one is underway as well. I think at a guess, we would feel that the water quality target is actually more challenging in many respects. The carbon neutrality was always intended to be a net neutrality, and with the afforestation occurring within the region and that which we expect both from our own interventions and those of central government, particularly through the emissions trading scheme, I guess we probably feel like the region's carbon neutrality is something that we think's broadly achievable with the current direction of travel. And I think on freshwater the jury's still out. But look, it's debatable in both cases about what's the right kind of colour coding and
Yeah, and look, if it's honest, that's not quite the right word. If it's factual, well, so be it. There's a subjective nature in there.
Yeah.
The key point there is, I guess, if we're asked the question, so you had an annual report last year, funnily enough, you've got another one this year which kind of says the same stuff. Mm-hmm. Have you done all you possibly can, given your resources, to say improve water quality, measure water quality, mitigate any issues, etc., which is kind of what you're doing in your carbon neutral one. Mm. So what is the answer?
Well, the answer is that we want to signal to the community is there's a lot more work to do on both freshwater and biodiversity, but I think you can equally argue that in terms of our transition to carbon neutrality. So on that front, I'd be equally comfortable if it was off track for the same sort of reason that we do want to emphasise that there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, okay. Well, carbon neutrality just underway is fine because it is underway. Mm-hmm. But there are obviously some milestones that we can openly declare. I presume we have them because we've set a target of 0 net in 29 years' time. So, in fact, by 2040, Hawke's Bay is carbon neutral. I thought they got pushed out to 2050.
Now that you mention it, there was a debate about alignment with the government's target.
We did align it to the government's target because that's what's in the LTP, I think. Remember where we landed?
That's the start of it.
Is that just a typo?
Oh no, so
Push it all the way up. Hi, councillors.
Let's speak out. We're not online, so just go for it. You don't need that.
we are
really.
So this is the third and final year of the 2018 long-term plan, so we're using the previous strategic plan.
Okay.
So we have adopted a new plan with a revised target that aligns with the national target.
Okay. All right. So checkmate. Okay. All right. Well, thanks very much for your answers. And look, this is tough stuff. This is our annual report. No problem at all. No doubt councillors will support it, and hopefully they'll be appreciated when it hits the community. I'll just move around to my left because I think I said, well, next action.
I haven't got anything actually except to just keep in mind that this is looking back in time as to what was achieved, whereas you've actually already in this year since started to achieve a lot more already. So it's exciting to see what the next annual report's going to look like. So well done. Thank you for the annual report.
Cool. That may have an Audit New Zealand opinion in time.
Yeah.
That would be quite a change. Will, have you got any thoughts or observations or comments in around the draft annual report we have in front of us?
A little bit similar to yours, Chair, but I would support the notion around re-looking at the council attendance in the report. I would have thought, as a ratepayer-funded organisation, everyone's would be interested in knowing, our engagement with the actual role. So I'm surprised, be keen to know why it was actually decided to take it off from previous councils. So I'd support re-looking at that. But just similar to the Chair's concern, really, particularly around the way things are quantified, such as by 2030, key species habitat are prioritised and under active restoration under healthy and functioning biodiversity off track. But then it goes on to say, there's been a lot of success and then actions to achieve, but not really any specifics around quantifying the off-trackness. So, but yeah, like Craig said, some of these dates are a long way off. So, I mean, is it more to do with just the 3-year long-term plan goals and targets as opposed to the looking right out to the 2030s, 40s or 50s? Is that what the key measure is? More?
So in setting the strategic plan and then the long-term outcome targets, we started with the proposition about what would success look like, whether it be for freshwater or for biodiversity or for erosion control. It's a comprehensive and complete solution, and that's sort of the timeframes we looked at is sort of that 2050 target, which is even pretty heroic in of itself. And I think what cumulatively, again, just to reiterate the point we're saying is that while we're making progress on these issues, the scale of the challenges are still well beyond the resources of this organisation. So there's still a lot more work to do around, the policy, the regulation, the leveraging resources, the building the capability in the community, etc., before we could be confident that we're really on track with nailing those issues. That's sort of the narrative. And I think given how significant the environmental issues are for the region and how much work lies ahead, we'd be doing a disservice to be signalling to the community that we've kind of got this all in hand, and the current level of investment, the current level of activity, the current level of regulation is kind of going to get us there. So I feel reasonably comfortable with continuing to signal a kind of a shortfall in that regard, but we've also got to show that we are delivering an awful lot of activity for the ratepayer that's contributing to the solution. There's just a long way to go. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I remember being here last year. Hard place to be because we all want to see massive wins and gains in the environment, but as a lot of these state, we just need more funds to do it, and so and we're grappling with the rate increases already, and the ratepayer community agreeing to those. So look, it's a hard place to be to know where to pitch it. But no, in saying that, and just to sum up, I think it was mentioned about all the work that goes into the report. So, yeah, well done to everyone that's put it together, because, it's obviously a pretty big piece of work. So thank you.
Thank you, and particularly the work that's gone into the summary version, because as a snapshot, that's actually, I think, really good. And if anything, it will be read by the vast populace of Hawke's Bay, it'll be that one. So thank you. Stephanie.
Thank you. I'd echo that in terms of the summary report. I certainly read that first and then used that as a good way to digest the rest of the materials. Huge amount of work, so thank you to all involved in that. I just have some queries. I jumped to the employee side of things in terms of some of the numbers. Yep. So we talk, just to check, are we doing the financial as well as the non-financial at this point?
If it's in the report, go for it.
And happy to take it offline if it's getting into too much detail. But I had some queries on page 154, which has the employee benefit liabilities. It's note 22. It was just after some clarity as to the difference between the regional council versus the group liabilities there. It just seemed a little odd that, for example, the sick leave accruals didn't seem to be any different between the two. Some of the numbers, as you go down the lines, there are different amounts, obviously relating to the different types of employing entities, but some of the those liabilities, like the accrued payroll expenses and the sick leave liabilities, were the same across both.
Can you give us an example of those numbers? So I'm looking at note 22, employment.
So we've got sick leave, so we've got 24 and 29 for the regional council and 24 and 29 for the group.
As opposed to the numbers above are all separate. Are different.
Yes.
Is there a typo in there?
It's a good spotting. I suspect that the sick leave from the port have not been carried across. We'll follow that up.
Okay. And similarly for the accrued payroll expenses, I would have thought that both entities would have accrued payroll expenses.
Possibly it's
Well, they
the
don't
fact
accrue
sick
sick
leave
leave.
often isn't fixed liability because it's an
No,
entitlement, but it's actually not a
May not accrue
liability.
sick leave. Yes, and I noticed that in one of the other notes around the way that sick leave was being treated and carried across. Because it's one of those funny things. It's a bit like insurance, isn't it? It may not ever get
Yeah, it may or may
realised.
not happen, and you only
We'll check
record it
that.
when it actually happens. Versus you've got, retirement gratuities. Obviously, that's only relates to the regional council where
Yes.
there's a pre-existing entitlement which is locked into a
Yes.
contract.
Yeah, I made that assumption that there were some certain things that related to one entity, not the others, but things like sick leave and the accrued payroll expenses I would have thought would have cut across both.
Yeah. Again, it depends on years, whether that's some of our allowances, or I'm not sure what's in there specifically. I'd have to check.
When it gets to the recs of this, I think we're just receiving it, so we just need to make sure that, just think about when we do put that rec, that subject to double checking of, I wouldn't be specific about this, but just the accuracy of some of these numbers to give you power to push it through further.
And any minor adjustments.
Yeah.
We may need to make some minor adjustments from audit.
Could be the granularity in terms of which perhaps the port is reporting to
It could
us in
be.
terms of the categories. Now, they may not have that category that we do, so I will check and I'll come back to you individually
Yeah.
on that one.
No, very, very well spotted. And yeah. Any other thoughts?
So no, that was the only little picky one from me. Thanks, guys.
That's good. It's not picky at all. It's just, it's got attention, and Neil Curtin, you'd be very proud of that one. Searching now for something similar, I'm sure, on a page past 154. We'll come to that. I was about to ask Jess, have you got any questions? Neil, have you got any thoughts or comments in around the annual report as we see it, the summary or the main report?
Yes, I do. You're distracting my attention there, Steph.
Okay.
So I'm going to have to go back to it.
Just as Neil was just doing that, after Neil's finished, just talk to us a little bit about the just some of the visuals and the metrics you've used in the summary. They're quite neat. I was just looking at the consistency of hectares planted and things like that across those different areas. Great examples, and I think it's just worthy of pitching it up. You could do. Neil.
Just if I can, perhaps Desiree, just ask the question, when we review the outcomes and the measures, the targets, what is the framework to review the targets and the process we go through? How does that, just remind me of how you're doing that?
In regard to the level of service measures?
If we make a change, when do we do it and how do we do it?
So there's two sets. There's the 23 outcome measures at the front, and they relate to our strategic plan. So that's a non-statutory document that the council adopted. So the most recent one, well, the one that we're referring to in this annual report was adopted in April 2017.
2017.
And we usually adopt it every 3 years.
That's right.
Adopted by this current council at the start of the training, so 2000.
No, the one that we're using in this annual report.
Sorry,
Yes. It's a year
And
behind.
so this
Okay,
council,
sure.
in the lead up to the long-term plan,
Sure.
adopted the strategic plan in
So the-
April 2020.
So the measures, the targets and measures for the current year have been revamped and reviewed, and we now have a new data set to work to. So that's useful. Can I just take you then to, because I haven't got that data set in front of me, I'm looking at page part 3, community outcomes, community outcome target, Napier Port. This is on page 42 or 45, so take your pick.
The summary or the main report?
Main report. So So can you tell me if we've left a Napier Port measure in this current year's data set?
I'm almost confident we
Haven't?
we have.
We have, okay.
Yeah.
Two questions then. One, in terms of measuring that in this year, the reporting on it, and two, measuring in future years, I would have thought that given our changed circumstance, we would no longer measure that.
I think that's probably correct. It was a point in time, obviously, where there was something we were seeking to achieve. Six Wharf's still under construction, but once it's completed.
Well, not so much that, the fact that we are measuring it. My view is that it's no longer our direct investment per se, as it was. I mean, it'd be as relevant as measuring the performance of retirement home in Southern California because we've invested in them.
We are still the majority owner. Look, I take the point. I think, look, if it's locked into the current LTP cycle, it wouldn't be worth, unless we're going through an LTP amendment and we just.
Oh no, I'm not suggesting we are, but I make the point that as things change, we need to amend that. And I was just looking at that opportunity, which is passed, obviously. Yeah. So I'll be interested to know for the current year whether, in fact, we are measuring that. The next one I've raised is we've put our hand up to by 2030 flood risk is being managed to meet foreseeable climate change risk out to 2100. I guess we are infrastructure reference. So that's the resilience improvements that we're looking at.
Yep.
Okay, then we're saying we're on track. I have a further question on that. Sorry to belabour things water, but it just seems to keep coming at me. I want to go to Part 4, Group Activities, Asset Management, page 77 or 75. For flood protection control work drainage activity, we've said that we've achieved our level of service and target. Chris, this is your territory. Can we legitimately put our hand up and say we have when, okay, you tell me we can?
So I'm happy to go through that measure. And the first thing I would say that particular measure, the way it's worded, relates more to our rural drainage, where crops can readily withstand short inundation, say for 24 hours until the water recedes, and in our rural schemes that have a low level of protection, that can happen. It's probably not a good measure for a urban waterway in relation to Napier. And the way that the team have looked at it is that it very clearly articulates that it's our infrastructure, which is the channels of Taipo, Piramu County and Plantation, and it refers to out of bank flow over that exceeds a 24-hour period. So when we look at the specifics of the measure, it doesn't include overland flow and it doesn't include the pipe network, which is owned by Napier. And the context is we're effectively providing an outlet for others, so an outlet for the city council or an outlet for a farm to discharge their drainage water into our waterway. And so the team have assessed that there was no out-of-channel flow in those 4 particular areas for more than 24 hours. Different schemes have different levels of service, so some of our rural schemes are to a 1 in 5 year level, and nominally for Napier it's 1 in 50. So with regards to the comment about the magnitude of the event, so the Regional Council CEDAM report concluded the magnitude of the flood event was equal or exceeded a 1 in 50 year event. So that's where those comments have come from. So we do acknowledge that for the network as a whole, it did not deliver on the nameplate capacity, and that's simply because some of the pump stations were without power for prolonged periods. So it clearly did not meet the nameplate capacity, but that's not what that measure is. And we've also calculated that the impact of one of those power outages on county increased the tailwater between 50 and 75 millimetres. And it's further recognised that there's a lot of work to do with the Napier urban waterways, and that's reflected in the fact that Napier have, I think, over 100 million in their 10-year LTP for urban stormwater. And we, as you're aware, are doing a comprehensive review of our scheme with Stantec, and we'll have those first results in July. So also noting that one of our priorities is to work through the mixed model of ownership to actually have a single point of accountability for the total network response. And so that's the priority that we're working through. So just recapping, really that measure is really more out of our 25 schemes. We have a couple in urban areas, the majority in the rural area, and that measure better reflects performance in the rural areas.
And I ask Chris, in terms of identifying those channels, I had assumed that Beats and Drain was a part of that network, that Aboriginal Council network. Is that not correct?
Some of those drains, yes.
So if there was water out of channel in Beats and Drain, and therefore we would be outside our level of service.
So that measure is for a 24-hour period. So on the typo, for example, we had out-of-channel flow, but it did not exceed a 24-hour period. So that's the way the measure has been written and constructed, and so that's the way it's been reported against.
The Beatson was flooded for almost a week.
Well, I can go back and talk to my team. I spoke to them before I came to this meeting, and so I can double check that.
Okay, we can dance on the head of a pin, but we've got a level of service statement that HBRC will maintain an effective drainage network that provides drainage outlet for rainfall for communities and productive land within the drainage scheme. On a technical level, we could say, well, I'm not agreeing, but you could potentially say that we met that target. I'm pushing back and saying even at a technical level we haven't, but certainly in the outcome measure we haven't achieved that. Going forward, is there room to modify the target or restate it so that we are putting our hand up to a measurable outcome that is well understood and easily accounted for?
Yes, so we do have that opportunity, and I think we changed a number of the measures in this LTP, but I just can't recall exactly what the changes were, but we can certainly come back with the old measures compared to the new measures, and I agree our measures should reflect our key deliverables, and I would agree in this instance it doesn't reflect the actual outcome for Napier because clearly there was an issue, but that's difficult to reflect through that particular KPI.
Well, that's the difficulty of a report, Mr. Chair. It's no good crying over floodwaters now. It's about what we're going to do in the future. That's just the important bit.
Thank you, Councillor. So, having had that discussion, you're comfortable with what's in there, but I think, just like we were talking about some of the human resources issues, there's actually some other work going on now, and I think it might be beneficial not just to this committee, but many other discussions around committee around this similar issue, that there's a joint understanding of what the targets were, what they are, perhaps what they should be, because 24 hours will be different from 12 hours, different from, so it's a bit of a rock and hard place. So can I just assume from that, or can we all assume from that, that you'll engage either informally or formally via one of their committees just to check that kind of thing, because we really should be on the same page as to what it actually means.
Yep. So we can do a comparator between the old and the new, and then we can have a further discussion around whether the new, I don't think we need to do that now.
We're not going to
change
this, but we will have that bit of work. So next year, hopefully there's not a flood event similar, but we don't need to have this discussion because there's joint ownership of what it actually means, what's been measured.
Yeah, well, we would need to change the measure.
Yes.
As I said, these are quite good at measuring the rural scheme performance.
Yep.
And there is a process to change the measure. So we'll just check what the measures were changed to and whether there's more work to do to make sure they're fit for purpose.
Okay. All right, thank you. And again, the test here is the larger audience out there. If they pick up this document and by and large they'd read that and their perception, we need to be in line with that. Let's not get stuck in some bureaucratic stuff. Okay, well on that note, I think that's all. Anyone else? You finished then?
Yeah.
Yep, thank you. Okay, can I just have a look at the recs, please? Just as we noted before, there might be a couple of typos there. I'd like to move, so Rec 1 recommends, Leanne, can you, subject to any minor adjustments. It's already, no, it's not actually. So recommendation 2 says, upon receipt of Audit New Zealand's final report, okay, and subject to any minor adjustments resulting from the audit. So what we just talked about are changes not resulting from the audit. They're just some typos.
Yeah.
Just why don't we just go full stop after adjustments?
Minor adjustments, yeah.
Leanne? Okay, so drop the words resulting from the audit, because that's a given anyway. So subject to that, I'd like to remove that we accept all those recommendations 1 and 2, essentially we accept the annual report. And again, note our appreciation, it's just tough work and we just look at the pinnacle of this stuff, but then there's an awful lot of work goes in down the bottom there. So James, to you and your team, thanks. And the way your team's on top of all of this, it's really appreciated. Can I have a seconder, please? Will, would you like to second that? And in favour, we receive that, those recommendations. Thank you, passed, done. Again, appreciate that. I did ask about the summary, but can I just hold off on that request when we go to at some stage to the full council with this, or Neil's committee, wherever it goes next. The introductory, using that summary, it's really neat. The presentations have really improved in this whole thing, so I think that will go down well. Okay, where are we up to now? I think the Treasury report. I'd love to have a printed agenda, Leanne, by the way, but I don't. Who's going to lead that one?
Over
Ross?
to you, Ross.
Ross, okay. Quarterly Treasury report for the July-September quarter.
Obviously, we're only into 3 months. This is only reporting 3 months into the year. Tried to keep the written report reasonably simple and brief. Obviously, there's the standard, more detailed report we get from PwC attached to that. Cash position was strong. Obviously, the earlier payment date for rates was very positive for cash flow as at end of September. Managed funds, to say fairly average performance the first 3 months, about 1% return. Obviously, hopeful be better for the last 3 quarters of the year. Borrowed a little bit of money at the beginning, mainly relation to topping up from LGFA. That's really the guts of it, I think, Mr. Chairman.
Just one point I had before I passed to others. Wasn't it, you note at this one, you've got that standby facility with BNZ, I think it says in there.
We do. We have had that for, I think, for some time. That's a $5 million facility. It means that we don't have to rush out, for example, to LGFA and raise money all the time. We can always, ebb and flow a bit with the cash flow and dip into that. I don't think we have yet this year, but it just gives that, in terms of liquidity, it gives us
it might be slightly outside of this one. I think the council's exploring having a similar facility with HBRC. That's outside of this quarter? I guess it must be.
Yeah, that will fall outside. So that's sort of the master agreement that we're working on with HBRC.
Yes. Okay.
Outside of the September quarter.
Okay, and just another point on the various managed funds. At the end of the day, they're all doing their best, and our Treasury report, that will be picked up by HBRC's various investments too, I guess. From what you've seen so far in the agreements the council has with HBRC for a dividend expectation, what is your level of current comfort that could be delivered, this would be delivered upon this financial year?
Obviously, I haven't looked into the rest of the year.
If you straight line everything you've just said, it might be a challenge.
I think probably the initial dividend, I think, was possibly slightly below expectations, so it could be a challenge to get the full amount. It depends, obviously, what the key driver for HBRC to be able to deliver is what comes through for the next port dividend, obviously. That's the
HBRC have cash reserves, which will enable them to meet their dividend expectations for this financial year, but beyond that, more variable.
Yes. Okay. Thanks. And other commentary says things may get tough or tight, and we've heard that from the finance team over the last few months.
And obviously, knowing we're dealing with markets can change quite dramatically in a short period of time.
Point being, then much of this is actually beyond our control.
Correct.
That's the key point. It's either passively or actively managed, and it's quite passive. Okay. And then,
totally dependent on how well Food East does, Craig.
well, I didn't share with you my phone call this morning, did I?
Just one thing I did I changed a little bit of the presentation in the table on page 9 to, because part of, in terms of the managed funds, is we've got obviously a capital protected amount, which is the amount that we expected to grow to inflate by 2% to protect our capital. So what I've then highlighted is, because we started at the beginning of the year with a little bit, I might say, in the kitty, beyond the capital protected amount. And so what I've attempted to do is just to show what that capital, the amount above. So we actually started with 3.3 million, which the value of the funds were that much higher than the capital protected amount, which without actually dipping into the capital, we could effectively draw back on that.
This is the 160k.
Yeah, so we hadn't fully divested all of the returns over and above our return expectations in previous periods, so there's a little bit of additional upside that we could draw down on in this financial period if required.
So you'll just use that to smooth out if necessary. But
instead of drawing down the cash, we just had left it in the fund.
So that's about 4 million, isn't it?
Including because that's at 30th September, that includes sort of the $1 million earned in the first quarter on top of that. So, because we haven't actually drawn down any money out of the funds as yet.
So the obvious trade-off you're making is, for example, that 160, if that is at the same or cheaper than any borrowings, you utilise that. That's the other choices you're making every day.
So I think I suppose the maturity of our Treasury function, I think, is coming along, and they're working closely with PwC, and we can see the benefits around investing some capability in that function in terms of the value to the ratepayer in the long term.
Yes. Yes. I mean, as we've been noted often, this organisation will turn over 105 mil soon, and its balance sheet's now about $1 billion, I think, all up. That is a significant place of wealth for Hawke's Bay residents. So, yeah, look after it carefully, please. Any thoughts, comments around these financials of the Treasury report here or PwC report?
Sorry, excuse me. It's little for me. You've pretty much covered it anyway, Jess. But it's just that you're getting your quarterly reports for the investments, and I think my only concern is just making sure always that they're the right funds that you're investing in. You're only with 2 fund managers, so that limits you a little. And I just want to know a little bit more about the review structure and how you do
and we
that.
haven't sort of finalised or formalised a timeline around reviewing whether we should have formal reviews of the performance of the fund managers and what that should look like. So I think that's something we could look at next quarter, is around we do need to have a SIPO review, and maybe we should introduce that formalisation around what the time frame should be around reviewing the performance of the fund managers.
I think that'd be an excellent idea.
I think very timely, particularly given our discussion earlier, as the Chair pointed out, with the expectations of HBRC, etc.
And we do have some additional resource starting in that function within the finance team in January, so I think that will allow us to enable that review to take place. So we'll bring that back to the next meeting, I think.
Having said that,
at least the scope around.
It's early days.
It is early days, yeah.
And we had an inbuilt comparator that between the two funds at least, and even amongst those, you've got a bag of investments taking place. So you've got an inbuilt scenario, and we could potentially go to yet another fund manager to try and draw that comparison. But there's again early days. It's a long-term investment. It's
I agree with that, and I think we should consciously make the decision either to review them or not to review them, and have a time frame around when we think that should take place.
But it's healthy to actually have that time frame every 5 years.
If it's 5 years, or it's 3, or it's 10, or if it's what is it, so we kind of know what we're working to.
I think it's a really good idea. I'll just leave that with you to help push over and just keep an eye on that one. I think it's a really good idea.
Right.
And no doubt HBRC will be interested in that as well. And their chair will be particularly interested in looking for things to do, I'm sure. Will, have you got any observations or thoughts around this?
Just post our LTP and our projections around borrowings, the debt management. Probably no sooner did we sign off on 1st of July, and interest rates have sort of jumped up quite a bit just in the last 6 months. How is that the case with our own borrowings as well, those interest rates, and still well within our kind of budgets or forecasts what those new rates will be?
So we did flag that, I suppose, in terms of the annual plan workshop that we had recently, was that we do feel as though we're a little more restricted in terms of our borrowing headroom and our borrowing covenants. And that movement in interest rates will provide some restriction that we'll need to address in the next long-term plan. We are okay, I think, going into the next year or two. We've got probably some flexibility within interest rate swaps, so we think we can live within what we've budgeted for within the next 12 to 24 months. But we'll need to budget for and provide for how we service our borrowing in the next long-term plan, and that will provide either some upwards pressure on rates, or we'll need to just look at that within our financial strategy, I guess. So that's something that we need to take into consideration.
There's a table in there which shows the interest rate risk, and we could have up to 90% of our borrowings under 90 days, and in fact the team have done about 40% and pushed the rest further out. So they've actually are slightly ahead of that curve, which is a credit, and I think you mentioned those forward borrowings or swaps a couple of meetings ago. Stephanie, any thoughts? Okay. Look, thanks very much. It is only a quarter. We can't straight line it. But we wouldn't be doing our job if we were a wee bit nervous about what's in front of us. So appreciate that, and please keep us informed as things develop. And I'm really interested to how this develops. Just have another look at a review of the structure. So can I, Neil, would you like to move those recommendations that we accept and note the quarterly Treasury report 1st of July, and confirms that the performance of the Council's investment portfolio has been reported to the subcommittee's satisfaction? You okay to move that? I'll second that. All in favour? All okay? Thank you very much. Done. Tipped. I think that's us. We're going to PE.